Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today's is a good one and I'm excited to talk about it because it's a technique. It's about a technique that I absolutely love to fish, and I had some growing pains with it to begin with. It's specifically, we're going to talk about the Ned rig, and it's a technique that I was very much late to the game on. I knew about it very early on, but I kind of shrugged it off because I was like, I don't understand the difference between it and say a shaky head or where you might fish a NACO rig. It just didn't seem to jive well with me. The first several times I used it, I never even had a bite. And I'm not talking about like 8-hour days, but during the course of a day, I might pick it up for an hour. And I never had a bite, not even a 6-inch bass, just really brutal fishing. And I was catching fish on other techniques at the time. So I was just not jiving with it, right? So I didn't throw it as much as I probably should have. I chalk it up to there were several things I think I was doing wrong from a tackle perspective, and we'll talk about that. But I really do think the correct tackle, correct setup as a whole is what works. And that's what I want to talk about today. I've gotten a lot of requests to talk about my Ned rig setup, everything from rod and reel to line to baits to hooks, where I like to throw them. So that's what we're going to get into. I do want to remind you, guys, if you want to support the channel, click the links that I have set up to tacklewarehouse.com. Do your shopping at Tackle Warehouse through one of those links, and a small kickback will come back to the channel. Or it's a really good way to show that you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out, and it encourages me to continue to make more videos. So I appreciate all of you that are using it. It's a very it's a great thing anytime I see that somebody made a purchase using one of the links. You can really support the channel by bookmarking the link to Tackle Warehouse in your web browser so that future purchases also come back to the channel. That would be very much appreciated as well. And most of the tackle I'm going to talk about today, I'm assuming you can get there. I haven't checked, but Tackle Warehouse has pretty much everything. Except for the rod. The rod, guys, is a custom build by myself. It's an MHX blank, and I guess that's where we'll start. So the correct rod and reel setup is a really important thing when you're talking about the Ned rig. I do believe that you want a fast action, good sensitivity rod. The one that I'm building, it's the MHX NSJ 871. What that means is it's a 7'3" 1-power rod. It's a fast action rod. And I think that's important for a couple of reasons. It's long enough to cast a light Ned rig out there. It's still got enough backbone to drive the hook home. It really handles the light line well. And it's still strong enough of a rod to play out a big smallmouth, a big largemouth, whatever it is that you're fishing for. To go along with that, I think you want a good spinning rod or reel that has a very good drag system. I am using the top of the line Abu Garcia. It's the MG Extreme. Just a phenomenal reel. It's got a great drag system on it, which to me is very important anytime you're dealing with big fish and very light lines. So, I realize it's top of the line, but considering that I'm fishing for a living in tournaments, I want to have a reel that really I can rely on 100%, and the MG Extreme is just an absolute go-to for me. From a line perspective, and I think this is very important, so I do fish a 10-pound braided line. This is the Berkley X9 High Vis braid. So I go with the 10-pound, and the reason I like the X9 is because it's a 9-strand, so it's a much smoother line. It flows through the guides better than, say, a smaller stranded braid, which I would use for grass fishing or something along those lines. So I always throw the braid to a fluorocarbon leader. It's the 100% Berkley fluorocarbon leader. And this was one of the biggest mistakes I was doing. So I'll use anywhere from 4 to 10-pound tests with this, depending on water clarity. Generally, I'm throwing either 6 or 8-pound test. But one of the biggest takeaways I had on early on when I was throwing the Ned rig with very little success is I was throwing a leader that was roughly 4 feet long. Way too short. Way too short. You want to go, my rule of thumb at this point for leaders is if I'm fishing 10 foot of water or less, then I'll go with nothing less than 10 foot. If I'm fishing, say 20 foot of water, I will put a 20-foot leader on. So I'm matching the depth of the water that I'm fishing to the length of the leader. And the reason for that is I just feel like it allows the bait really to be unseen by the fish. I personally do feel like braid can give off a sound in the water that allows fish that are really finicky the ability to potentially hear it or feel it. So from that standpoint, I want to go with a long fluorocarbon leader. And from my own personal experience, a short leader gets way less bites than a long leader. So that's a number one tip. From a bait standpoint on here, I've got a light jig head, but there's a couple of baits that I like to use, a couple of hooks that I like to use. And this really is just personal preference. Again, I've tried a lot of different ones and I've had success with some, and not success with others. From a hook standpoint, I think there's two that I really have gotten to like at this point. The Z-Man Shrooms, the Finesse Shrooms is kind of a standard, and I'll use this. They've got them up to maybe a sixth, I think a fifth of an ounce, but they've started a 20th of an ounce, and then I like the Berkeley Fusion 19, the half head jigs, which is a great jig head too. I think this one starts at a 16th of an ounce and then gets a little bit heavier. But the reason I like both these baits is they've got a smaller hook in it, which I think is important too. I think when you go with the bigger hooks, they don't allow the baits to move the same way. And again, I think the fish can recognize them. So I personally like to throw the smaller hooks. These both, I believe, come standard with a 1/0 hook in it. And that's just personal preference again. If you're going with a bigger bait on your Ned head, then you may want to go with a bigger hook on it. But I do think you get more bites on a smaller hook. And both of these, when I'm throwing the tackle that I am with light line, I have no issue with both of these being light wire hooks. Again, I've got my drag set really, really light, so I'm playing the fish out, not horsing them in. I know I've heard about people breaking like the original Shrooms, Finesse Shrooms hooks off, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're just using tackle that's overpowering the hooks. So in my opinion, these are the best two. The half head one is a little bit stronger. It's a little bit stouter, which is one of the reasons I really do like this one. But again, they're kind of interchangeable for me at this point. I don't feel like I've got one that I prefer over the other. It's kind of which one do I reach down and grab when I'm rigging one up. The baits I am picky about. I do have 3 baits that I really like, and I've used a lot. And I'm not saying others don't work. These are the ones that I've gotten to the point where I have confidence in. And I'll kind of break down when I like to throw them. The 3 that I like to use, kind of the standard original, the Z-Man. This is just the Finesse TRD. The colors I'm choosing here are, I'll get into that, but these are just the first bags I grabbed off the rack. So we got the Finesse TRD, the Max Scent Little General by Berkeley, and then I like the Robo Worm. They call it the 3-inch Ned Worm. These 3 are the ones I like to go with. The biggest difference for me in choosing a worm has to go with the fall. So fall speed is very important. I think you've got one of 2 approaches when you're using the Ned. You want a super slow fall or you want a very fast fall. If you have a super slow fall, I'm talking about using a 16th of an ounce, a 20th of an ounce jig heads. And when that bait's falling, you get much more of a gliding motion, which can be an extremely good triggering thing. So if the fish are suspended a little bit higher in the water, or they're aggressive, or they want that slow fall, that's when you want to go with a light bait. The opposite would be switching over to, say, like a 1/4 of an ounce bait, which is going to get you a straight up and down fall. You're not going to get any motion out of that bait because the bait is the weight is too heavy to allow the bait to get it to move around as it's falling. The reason I like that is if you've got fish that are not committing to the slow fall, you need to create the reaction strike. And if you get a fast fall, that'll trigger the fish if it falls by them quickly. I've seen it a lot of times where you have fish that just don't want the slow fall. They don't want a medium fall, but you put something on that's falling extremely fast and it gets them to react. I've seen it a lot of times on Lake St. Clair where it makes a big difference. So the reason I think that's important is, so if you look at like a bait like the Finesse TRD by Z-Man, this floats. So if I want the slow fall, I'm going to put the TRD on the lightweight jig head to create an even slower fall. So if I'm, say, using, a 1/16 of an ounce half head, I'll put this on and I'll get a slower fall than I would if I went with the Berkeley Little General or the Robo Worm. So to me, that's where it comes down to choosing a bait. If I want the slow fall, I'll go with the floating one. If I want the fast fall, I'll put on one that doesn't float. The other difference is 90% of the fish that I'm catching, I catch on the fall or the initial drop. I'll let my bait drop, hit the bottom, I'll let it sit for a minute. I might pop it a few times to get it up off the bottom and kind of glide back. And then I'm generally reeling it back in. So if I'm doing that, I'm getting my fish to bite on the fall and I'm not really working my bait back, at that point, I don't really care if my bait floats or sinks. So again, in that instance, generally I'll go with the sinking bait because it doesn't really impact it. If, though, I am getting fish to commit to the bait when it's on the bottom, and because I'm dragging it, kind of working my bait back, that is when I do like to go with a floating bait to keep the tail end of the bait off, because I am working it more like a jig or a shaky head. So that's one of the biggest differences. If I'm fishing, like a lot of times with docks, if I'm fishing docks, those fish commit on the initial fall. That's when I would go probably with a sinking bait. If they're not, and I'm working that bait, say down a rock ledge, that's when I'd go more with the floating bait. So that's kind of the difference for me. I do think they both have their place. From a color perspective, I'm almost always going to be using some sort of natural color, your browns or your greens, or a shad type color. So your smelt colors, your silvers, just something that looks much more like a bait fish. And that just comes down to where I'm fishing. If I've got schooling fish, I'm fishing suspended fish, that's when I'm going with something that is more of that bait fish color. And if I'm fishing the bottom or fishing just on the fall, where I'm fishing areas where the fish aren't really keying in on bait fish, that's when I'll go with the natural colors, the browns and the greens. So that's, really what my setup comes down to. The Ned Rig, though, for me, has got a couple of really good times when I really want to key in on using it. And I'll talk about kind of my primary thing for each species. If I'm fishing smallmouth, it is an absolute killer bait if you've got fish that are up roaming flats. So if those fish are, say, up on a sand rock transition, maybe a little bit of scattered grass, anywhere from 3 to 15 feet of water, it's really hard to beat a Ned Rig. That's kind of my go-to area. It just seems like those fish are up roaming around and it's a good way to pick off isolated fish. If I'm fishing largemouth, I love fishing largemouth. Like if we got channel swing banks or like a rock transition, that's where I absolutely love using it for largemouth. Anywhere you've got just a good rock transition type bank is dynamite. It seems like those fish really have a hard time denying that. And then with spotted bass, that's when a lot of times I'll fish it more as a suspended bait. So if I've got spotted bass that are suspended over 70 feet of water chasing bait, it's really hard to beat a lightly weighted, bait fish colored Ned Rig. You can almost just use it, do your tight lining techniques, and it works absolutely phenomenally well for those three species. You can use a Ned Rig almost anywhere, but those are three situations that I absolutely love to throw it. It's just a bait, guys, that if you haven't used it yet, you really want to try it, because there are lots of times where the fish just seem to want that over other baits. And for me, I just think it comes down to the fact that it looks natural and it's something that is just so unintimidating to the fish that they're not concerned about it. It's not putting out vibration, it's not putting out sound. It's just a bait that's either falling through the water or spiraling through the water or gliding through the water. It's doing nothing that really is going to spook the fish. So I think you can present it in a manner that's very natural. So that's it, guys. I absolutely love this bait. I will be throwing a lot of it this year. I'll be doing a rod build if you guys are interested. I'll be showing you how to build the rod, providing you with all the components, all of the rod specs that I use later on in the year once we get rid of some of the ice on the water. And I'll show you how to build it, take it out, and then we'll fish with it just to show you why I like it. So you can stay tuned for that. Otherwise, guys, if you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. If you've got other Ned Rig baits or terminal tackle that you like to use, throw it up in the comment section so that other people can see what you guys like. And stay tuned. We got another video coming out tomorrow.